Nga sedi di webini chili na ani pumudi rebe dele losu re sin tivadi tangala niela ani kasigure webini chili na yana pumudi ingore yana dele losu yogores kanzam chiyoshi korwa ani pumbu kora pumbu chobada chashi digi diye mahi dele losu mena ta meba tachi tubeji Dindijimena, and Hungary Silla, Kawari, Bumbari, Lava, Kujuke, Marva. Which is at the Kanzum Chevy Pungo, Digi, the Kanzum Contest Chetugre, Tache Tugre, Pungudi, my Musawa, the Shady Digi, my Dele Loso Mena, Metache, CG, Taji Chetugre.
So then we say, I, saying that the I in the reality or in actuality does not exist. Well, first we need to investigate, we need to analyze, is the I any of the aggregates, any of the five aggregates, or does it exist as a separate entity from the five aggregates? So when we ask that kind of question, first we have to see that either if it exists in reality, then it has to be one of the aggregates or the collection of the aggregates, or it has to exist as separately. So we have to decide on that. There's no other way in terms of its existence. So seeing that the I is neither one of the aggregates or the collection of the aggregates, and it also doesn't exist as a separate entity, then we can decide that it's not there, that it doesn't exist in actuality or in reality. Understanding that it's none of those to say it is a pillar or a vase does not make any sense. So how do we decide that if the self, if the I is none of these, it is neither any of the aggregates or the collection of the aggregates, nor is it does it exist separate from these? How do we decide then? How do we come to this decision? How can we make sure we know then, therefore it cannot exist at all?
Niela tisila nantigido cheza duschini ani de konani chulbi gala ani tanda bejiti la chora ta chigdu chegi tensi gi toni sodan chewa ina anne hi en changweji tambodi ani rang mu youtube sineta webini chuba sedi kanjeji de lagu yumedi watch and this is a sim lo tenji gi zindan zinlu digidi ani watch go ba chigche 디 모트레사 위치라 딘디기 모이니 줄이 유나 아니 야나 풍부디니 인고래 야나 데리 로스 요거레스니 바기 타치 투버 니버티체 디 타치에서 위치라 아니 신이 다 아니 풍부 초바다 차시 디게디 아니 마인세네 디기민두스 타치에 지지 데리 로스 안가샤네 디기민두스 타치에지 어 디시디 차나 안 디체르 신이 아니 마마시디 아니 당신이 좀 민두 세대 타주에 투베데 이 신의 용투베지 딩에라 디시기디 따다 야부 창매나 협여 잡지마도 매나 담에 타주에 뒤에 협여지마도 원에 타주어지 용투고
So when we talk about the self, well, first this may be helpful to talk about it in this way. So when we analyze the suchness, when we analyze the suchness of the phenomenon, for example, independent on the reason that the phenomenon doesn't exist intrinsically because it's neither truly exists in one nor truly exists in different. So using different reasonings, first we need to make sure that there are 4 points, 4 factors that are satisfied or that are fulfilled here. The first factor is that if phenomena exist by way of their own nature, what would that actually mean? What would that imply? And how does existence by way of its own nature or existence from its own side, how is that apprehended by our misperception? That's the first point. The second point is if it exists from its own side, if something exists by way of its own nature or from its own side, we need to be able to decide then either it exists as one of the aggregates or the collection, or it exists as separate from the aggregates. And having decided that, then we come to see that it is none. We have to see then which one is it? Is it those aggregates? We have to look now. Is it one of the aggregates? Does it exist or not? So now we need to really investigate that. And then the last point, the last factor is coming to the conclusion that it doesn't. The third factor is we have to see that it is neither of the aggregates or the collection. And the fourth factor is understanding it doesn't exist as separate. So if we have done all this, then we can say that the phenomenon does not exist intrinsically. So without that, without these 4 factors, there's no way to decide that it can actually not be found. So with respect to the self, so therefore we come to see that the self, we have a sense that the self does not exist as one with the aggregates, and it does not exist as separate or different from the aggregates. But at the same time, it does exist in reality. So there's that sense that although it's neither of those first two, nonetheless it exists in actuality or in reality.
가시지 좀. 나베 나로는 가시지요. 하정비 유뉴. 这是这个事情的。
说我不是一，我与运体不是一，我与运体也不是一，但是呢，却能够说我是有的这样子的人呢，在佛教徒当中呢是有的，但是很少，非常少，多少呢？大概1%左右。
就是他这个，因为他去接触没有赢呢。 공부에 말에 때리 로스 요 말에 세티 토는 무인이즘에 타치 투고 메나 리버 가지 단에 단에 배 무인이즘도 세다다 제도금이다 진짜 디 타치 투고 싶고 봐라 다디 타치 투고 매바 이나 인기에 가리어르시나 아니 답변은 가장 배샤에게 타절 주도스 배기 주도스 란다 주문이 요번 진지 아니 신하게 용도 다 콜을 주매바 때문으로 타고의 키지 디 타고를 해도스 신다 가도 신다 개민도 왔어. 다디 다가랑이 토네 아니 다 파게 주문에 민두스 타제도다. 다 디기 타제도고 메나 디니 니 타바레 주말에 대신단에 민도 왔어. 레디 던들레 주메바 타제도고 메나 아니 먼저기 가야 메스는 타제도에 메다. 아니 주요 디레 타바디에 말에 데레 로스에 요 말에 이네 주요레스. 무슨 저거이나 아니 같이 없다. 또 디코 저담인도 어디.
Now, if we cannot decide that, if something were to exist in reality, if something were to exist in actuality, then it has to be either the aggregate or it has to exist as separate. It has to be one with the aggregate or it has to be separate from them. So if we cannot decide that, there's no way for us to be able to see that the phenomenon can't exist. So if we can't decide that, then it's impossible if we don't find it among the aggregates or separate from the aggregates to then to decide that it's not there at all. So without that decision, there is no way. And this is why Geshe-la said that yesterday or before when you talked about the example of the snake and the rope, mistakenly imputing a snake onto a rope. Well, if there really was a snake there, we should be able to find it. And so our intention is to show that there is no snake. That this actual object, the object on which the snake has been imputed, is a rope. And what is actually there is the rope, and there's nothing else there. So if we show this to a person who's fearful with respect to the snake, well, then we can easily show this person, look, it is not the rope, this rope is not the snake, it doesn't exist anywhere else as that's separate from the rope, so there's no snake. And that way we can decide that there is no snake. The person can come to understand that there is no snake. Without that, if we do not come to that kind of conclusion that if it exists in reality, there's only one way. It has to be existent as within the snake or separate from it. Saying that, oh right, it's not the rope, it does not exist as separate from the rope, but there's still a snake, that's kind of silly to say that. I mean, there's just no way to be able to reason with such a person if they still insist that there is a snake.
아니 소소를 유해들어 아니 고모다 치숨지 유해버체 아니 미지 있잖아 봉지 유해를 나와다마다 소소 대바야 보면서 말을 봉지 유서를 삼는 유해나 다 유로 다 소소 비시 샤서들 뱅나 샤이는 나나 샤이 뱅나 가지도 어부나를 가지도 안 되게 뒤dom나 다 치숨을 현단에 가와민도 안다 봉지 민도 스타처로 디타마체는 소소 비시 가지고 있는 소소 하모 공에 딘데
So likewise, if one takes another example, like taking one's own case, let's say you only have 30,000 rupees, and someone asks you, do you have 100,000 rupees? So first you check, you first see, do I have 100,000 rupees or not? So what do? You check in your room, you check in your purse, you check in your bank, and then you come to see, well, I don't have or I do have 100,000 rupees. If you can't find it there, well then you can very decisively say, I do not have 100,000 rupees. So if one does not come to that kind of conclusion, well, that's just against common sense. Likewise, if we were to ask on this cushion that Geshe-la sits on, is there an American sitting on that cushion? So Geshe-la is saying that's easy to answer. I'm not an American, there's no one else sitting here, so therefore I can easily decide, come to the conclusion there is no American here.
아니 신의 뒤워들리고 그러다 맞은 뭐인지 그 소고되기들에 자시들에 델레 로스 유어에 세디 다 뒤워들리 다 풍비 저바다 체질이는 아마 인시디 허브데칼 띵아르베 마이나는 나와시라 두고도 마마레 라바사미나다 시라시라 파르바다에 게미도 다 리바다모라 저거딩아르베스 한 타제모라다 마마레스나 가르치니 nga mare karsena nga ine dan pena karsigure ta zugudi mene nga lade yore ro zugudi sabra malane nga sabra langi yore zugudi samdanga mare nge samdanga yore laba ina gyumjen di kije di ina zugudi nga mare laba de mare di mare gyumjen ta haran kije chasam me cha dudo ta dina shin ne sheba ina sheba di ina jibuji yang ane sheba de nga mare karsena ngala tagi tu le tu sheba tu tagi mi do shebi gyundi nga mare ngala tagi tu se tu shebi gyundi tagi ki jamare nga sabra lan tu sheba sabra lan ki jamare ro nga to bala na bu chu ti nga na bu sha sun la ti ani sheba na bu cha bi ki jamare ni ma si na nga na bu sha sun la do sheba na bu cha yo mare ri bo chi bu chi kyang du do di chang 다 초과들이 대스 바기 가시질 초과디 임비 성로 초과 초과디 지부지장 단다기 수보다 셈 류티기디 초과디 디지디 마교왕마 요르시디 초과디 교왕마 요말 마 아니 제마시니 기와 제마 두르시 초과디 기와 제마 두고 말 어떤지 상담다 리포트 지부지장 편주도 디지디 아니 풍비 초과디 차시 가야 아니 나마 임바 기시 임바 이나 아니 인념 딩아이나 디에 말에 디에 말에 얼마나 무시고요다 마동도 못 찾을 때는 안 두테리르네 말에 다 칼라리 레미 마사바리 레미다 칼라리 사용돼 어떤지는 지지리 아니 리버기 땅는 기지 시바이나 안 분이 초바다 차시 가야 아니 가면 이것도 스타치로도
Now, having decided, I mean, in order to decide now that this is the only possibility, having decided that this is the only possibility, then with regard to the self, either it is one with the aggregates, it's separate from them, or doesn't exist. So then the question that arises is, well, or the kind of issue that arises is, how do I actually now look and decide that the aggregates are not the self? So Geshe-la said, for example, his finger. I may just decide, okay, it doesn't really make sense, my finger is the eye, so it's not the eye. But that's not the way to go about it, in the sense that that is not enough of certainty, it's not enough certainty here in this case, deciding that just because it doesn't really seem to make sense, that therefore I'm not my finger. Rather, one needs to generate reasoning and well, apply reasoning, analyze and understand why the finger cannot be the self, to really come to that decisive, to that kind of conclusion that no more doubt could arise after that. So, for example, why is my finger not the eye? Well, my finger is not the eye because I may have an itch, but my finger doesn't necessarily itch. Or I think about something, but that doesn't mean my finger thinks. So these are different reasons we can apply that establish and help us to gain certainty with respect to the fact that the finger is not the eye. And then that same reasoning that's just been applied can be applied to other objects, other parts of the body. So my hand, my arm, etc. So physical parts of the body. Likewise, whatever the eye does, those parts to know how to do. Also with regard to the consciousness is not the eye, because someone can look at me, may look at me, but I wouldn't say someone looks at my consciousness. In the same way, the mental continuum, or the continuum of the consciousness, that is not the eye, because in the same way, someone may look at me, but this person does not necessarily look at the continuum of my consciousness. Or I may have an itch, but my consciousness doesn't necessarily have an itch. Another example would be if I blacken my face, if I put black color on my face, I would say I am black, but you wouldn't say the consciousness is black, or I have my face is black, or I have black color applied to me. You wouldn't say that you could apply that to your consciousness. So here the idea is there are similar reasons, or the same reasons actually, that you can apply to all these different situations. So first you think up these reasons, and then you apply them to the different circumstances, or to the different factors. Here, the different aggregates. Likewise, with regard to the collection of the parts, the collection of the aggregates, there are quite a few people who think that the self is the collection of the aggregates. But when we say the collection of the aggregates, that means mind and body. Now, it is not mind and body that has come from a previous life, and is not mind and body that goes to the next life. I go to the next life, but the collection of my mind and body do not go to the next life. So that is another type of reasoning. Again, we can apply that kind of reasoning to the collection. And likewise, if I say the collection of the aggregates is the self, well, it is not, because whatever one part of my aggregates does, not all parts do it. So whatever kind of, for example, when I say I take food, for example, all the particles in my body do not take food. So if the eye is the collection of the parts, if it's all the parts, whatever one part does, all the parts have to do that. So if I eat food, then the collection, that means each and every part that makes up the self has to eat food. So in that way we can come to see that neither any of the aggregates, any part of the aggregates is the self, nor the collection is the self. So it's important to come to that kind of certainty, to come to that kind of decisive conclusion about this fact.
다 디지디 다 기시 로스여바 이나 아니 다디 니디 두스 키조바 이네 디타디기도 디 가르치네 디 파키조디 디 마조와시 타디에디 가르치네 코페디 로가 이에디기로 로가 인상 그 조디선에 콜레보 이김세미도 진짜는 신지 풍 다디 풍부디리 로스지여바 이나 풍부디기디 마두스 레네 바실바 이네 다디리스 하이즈고 다디지도 다들 테지비스 수행미도 다 구자하라는 제시하는 제선다 디딜리 로스레스 라우 쪽시세디 딜리 로스레스 디 조지마 인디 조지세디 요나 딜리 로가레스 딜리 로가 지디 다 자신가고 딜리 로스 요나 안 디키도디 조지 요르베 요리 나오지기로 그래서 디파키도디 조지 팔 이거 말아 디파키 주디 조지메바 차고에미도 로가요나 딜리 로스요나 다 디파키 주디 조지요레 디키 주디 다 지고지견데 조지요레 디키 주디 조지요레 디키 주디 조지요레 다 딜리 로스로 조지디 디파키 산에 조지요레 다 매워 세버로 다 이내 안 먼저 하모고 얘기 먼저 통모티 얘기 다 조지세 유에 원데 다나 뭐지 유에 원데 다나 예 라바이나 디 조지레기 말이 그래서 조지 저와 제도입니다. 그래서 유배원도 단 지단지나 다 파샤자도 번낭디 모두 믿어. 번낭디 조지 말아. 기시단 시 유배원도 단에 디 조지기 저와 제도 말아. 조지 저와 배는 다 가자다만 신지 아니 포바샤야의 대샤야. 뭐 살도도 조지 저와 제도입니다. 어떤 디는 신지 아니 마세디 품이 소바다 차시 디게들이 로스유나 수버리리니 파실 파르리니 기타 무스키에 메네 로기 디치는 디고르와 다 리레니 파 실체위제라 단뒤에 다디 라데고르 사제딜라 에 셰버디에 파르리니 파키 다 조체만 두고 있는 가지고 있는 디 키찬이 제레 단뒤에 다디 라데고르 딜레디 수보다 아니 셰버디기 파 키사위제라 다 데자디간 동고마도 바난디마도 민도 바난디 다 말어 야나면은 지 유버 차샤다 먼저 미마 통해기 수부의 시험성 파키 차니 미마 통해지 유버 차샤나 뒤에 다리 말 그래서나 다기 저와 지금도 다기 저와 맞이에 가르래서나 아니 풍부면은 다기 저와 지기 매버디 무슨 세버로 풍부면에 다기 저와 지기 유버이나 미 론찬에 매기 통거로 라바면에 라바 체찬에 라베들이 쉬고 라베 칼라사 가서 미 칼라사에다 칼라사다 사야로 사조로 다 달라고다 신체에다 들이라고 강바 매네 공부제에다 주샤르에다 근데 민도 진짜 풍부면은 매기 저와도 제도입니다 말을 직제수 얘기 직진세 저와도 제도입니다 다 저와 맞제네 단뒤에 다 인스 인디 뭐지 요래 되게 다기 저와 지기와 말에 이내 단뒤에 다 인다가 있나 다르게 주인이라는 되기도 다르게 할수 있는 말 주기 저와 지기면 또 승진대로 어떻게 되나 될 로스메가 타셔루다
So if the self were to exist as separate, if it were to exist separate from the aggregates, well, Geshe-la took the notebook in his hand, for those who sit outside, so Geshe-la took the notepad in his hand and removed it from the table. And he said, why, if I remove the notepad, I do not automatically remove the iPad? Why is that? Why do I say when I remove the notepad, then iPad is still left. And so the answer is because they're separate. So they're separate, which means if the self were to exist separate from the five aggregates, then they would be separate in the sense that even if I remove each of the aggregates, if I were to remove each one of the aggregates, I would still be left with the self. So the same is true for the table. I'm saying each of the parts, if I were to remove each of the parts, if I were to remove each of the parts, it doesn't mean I'm still left with the table. But if the table were to exist as a separate entity from those parts, I could take away each one of them and still would have the table left. So he actually demonstrated how he removed each part, one after the other. So there are 4 legs and 1 surface. So we're removing one leg, removing another leg. When you do this, it's like when you remove the first leg, this table is still there because it exists as separate. So hypothetically, assuming it does. So then you remove the second leg, the table is still there. The third leg is still there. The fourth leg. And if removing each part, then still the table would have to be there. So even when all the parts are gone, you will still have to have a table. So the only thing that you could come up with is hypothetically you had a table, and that table was invisible. So you have an invisible table. If the table exists separate from its parts, you have an invisible table. Well, how can you say it forms the function of a table? And the surface, okay, maybe you say you have the surface left, but that is not a table. And if nothing is left, you have nothing to perform the table in the sense, as previously said, we put something on the table. So the table performs a function such that it can hold things when you put them on the table. But if there's nothing there, then you just put something in space and it won't be able to it won't be held by anything, it will just fall through. So therefore, in that same kind of reasoning, we can now apply to the body or to the self. We can apply this to the self and look at mind and body. We can either do it physically, literally, or mentally go through the body and go through the mind. So if we were to take away the body, for example, take away the body, would there still be an I? Well, it would have to be. If there was a self, then even without the body, there would still be an I, there would still be a self. If we were to take away the consciousness, there would still be the self. But actually, if we were to remove the mind and body, all there would be space, empty space. And again, if we say, oh, okay, there's an invisible type of self, well, that invisible type of self does not perform the function of a self. So therefore, if there's no aggregates, there's no self. So if it's not there, it cannot perform the function of the self. So if we say it can still perform the function, well, we could cut off the arm of a person, and we can say, well, this person can still cut wood. So if the arm were to exist, if the self exists as separate from the 5 aggregates, then the arm would have to exist separate from its parts. So you cut off a person's arm, and the person would still be able to cut wood. Or you cut off a person's leg, and the person would still be able to jog and run around. If we say that even though there is a self, but it doesn't have to, there is a self, there's a separate self. You remove all the parts, the aggregates, and still you have a self, but it just doesn't perform the function of a self. Well, why can't we say that the rope is a snake? If for the self, when it's there, to not have to perform the function of a self, so we can also say that the rope is an actual snake, because the snake doesn't have to perform the function of a snake. So in that way, we can come to the conclusion that the self does not exist as an entity separate from the aggregates.
아니 치르베 시시 다디 딱바치 시기도 교화메버 시기도 교화메버디 다샤바이 교화메닝지 다샤바이나 안나카 다인다버도 집어 차두래 라이 인주디레 거의 교화메닝 교도메딩이 든지지나 자와치고 말어 자와마 징이지에 다인나나 안나카 다인다버도 집어래 거나카 다인나데 거 네지 다이밍이 차두러 이순고
So what I just said, this is in accordance with also Chandrakirti's reasoning. Chandrakirti, he applied a type of reasoning with respect to what the non-Buddhists say, who say that there is a self that is permanent, that is not a product, and that is not changing. So when we say there's a self that is not changing, that is permanent, that is the same as saying that uncompounded, that is permanent, unconditioned space is the self. So therefore we couldn't really find any logical flaw with saying so, because the self is not changing, is permanent, etc. So there's no fault in saying that it's the same as uncompounded or unconditioned space.
That was it. That Digi Pagi Jodan Dina Shinchin draw in a Muin Tache Dredge. That Anani Kazakini Shibi covered and Sachinichi, Shie di Kaji Keber Musuma Journey, Shigu, Kaji Chebersina, Tempertuna, Tempertubici, the Macaron the Tuba, Tempertubici, the Dikijamash, Tempertuba, Ramuni Tubas, then the Mingus Mame Viton. Chesan reaching the Sidi Keber Musu to Koha the Charkavatachi. In Sik Keber Musuma Jarwachi Tichina and Koha the Cha, Koacha Sasuna and Shine, Pai Sima Tuegi Dundala, and Shine Sik Keber Tada Chani, Lava in a Yavan Metro something.
So in that way, in reality, something cannot be found. If we investigate in that way, if we analyze in that way, we can come to see that in reality, the self and so forth cannot be found. So here, what I've not done so far, I've not applied the kind of attributes or the kind of characteristics with regard to the object of negation, in the sense of applying characteristics with regard to an object of negation means if something exists truly, then I can apply the characteristic of that phenomenon also existing as either truly existing one or truly existing different. So using that kind of terminology or using those kind of ideas, initially it's easier to not explain those kind of characteristics, those kind of particularities with regard to the object of negation. So first I've just given you like a general kind of explanation, kind of implying those absurdities that it's either a truly existing one, etc., but without using the words. And then later on, once you have a good sense of what it means to be truly or inherently existent, then I can apply these attributes, I can apply these particularities.
That the Lola Churchill candidates coming in to Tansara, so sometime you get it. That only Chemowache, Rangi Churchill in Lagua. The Ladisan and Churchill in the Mutumba Yuna, and it should allow the Tito, and it could draw Satura.
So also with respect to how does the self appear to the mind? How does it appear to our awareness? So I've asked you before to kind of investigate that. So there's no need to discuss it right now, but for you to observe what is the way in which that self appears. And is that in accordance with the kind of reasonings, etc., or is it in discord? Is it discordant with regard to what we discussed here? And so later on, you can share that with us. You can talk about how the self appears to you.
That didn't mind to his jaggy, around Lola, Marcy, and the Cherry Engine. The Shija Dusane, Chesan Yella Ding Hevache, and the Mutumba Yuna and the Shulton Cheche, Nilola Chasula Tintitus, see it meet out in the Tusina and the Troneche. That Dimena, and Dinema Lulu Karsure, that Nigin Mala, Dumana Mata, Susula, Marcy, Samotana, Peggy, Alam Comjavana Hinchin, Nidijan, Comjavana Hinchinima. So journey, the Chishan, some tongue.
So anyway, Geshe-la will now give an explanation of how the eye appears to him. What is the appearance to his own mind? So if the way it appears to his own mind, if that does not accord with your own experience, then later on you could talk about this, you can share it with everyone. But right now, just see whether it's different or not. So as Geshe-la is explaining, you could take this opportunity to meditate, as in like go inwards and see whether whatever Genla says also applies to your own, or applies to you from the point of view of your own experience. Whatever Genla says, does the eye appear to your mind in that same way? So try to compare it by engaging in kind of meditation here.
The digitizane, any Shogane Chenita, Karsuri, Yalang. Yalani any Tuluku and Tulumaquena, Labor the Tarim, that in Namtar Chinsha, my child grace, and Tuluchi. 아니 소모치나 양 체디 말은 나사티니 손나야티니 와 소시티 안 동범어치는 데스 대부지 민도 상세 마 대부민도스 안 동범치 다 마칼라사고도스는 쇼쇼통 다 마칸데지고도 마수놈사고도스 양 간데나체 어딘데 진짜 지정데 아니 칼라사야 고다 칼라사네 진이다 인간들의 아니 거리 수치도 지기도 쓰는 내치도 제등이지 지단지는 다다다데 충중레데 이내 미지 til을 샤제 아니 쇼 미디 쇼가야라 아니 지도서 디 미디 동바치 미디라서 티 라 아니 쇼제디야게 어두지니 니만인가 지시 근데 지는 다와지지나 다와지그래 차스 땅 아까래 가고도 지불하게 지는 쇼스 디니레레도 이내 말한기 디제들라 다다가 롱업주보다 든지 제대로데 다 망다소세야 저보다 저걸로고도 세체는도 제가 간지 쉬우지 쉬우지 강들이야 디게디 수위치도 지기도 세나 나기치도 제등이지 디지도 나디 개치 쉬우지 진 다추기 계제 때쳐의 때스 장제 아니 겨와제마 아니 니송 요리 다요시 당황이 손께는 지기미도 나 아니 대조를 제고도 댄상고 터고도 양 되네 야즈 장제 타버터베요래 마 타버터고도스 안 되네 상제 요스 마 상제 고고도스 나 디게 지금 쉬우지 지대지 된지 용되기도
So when we think about the self, so the self here in the morning, like in the morning we get up in the morning, we put on clothes. Okay, so these days it's becoming a little colder, the weather has changed, so I'm thinking I'm cold, I don't want to be cold, so we put on clothes. And then we brush our teeth, because that's healthy. Not brushing our teeth is not good for the teeth, so in order to keep healthy, we brush our teeth. If we do not wash our face in the morning, we may feel uncomfortable. We do not want to feel uncomfortable, so we wash our face. Then we eat. We have to eat something. We do not feel comfortable if we don't eat. We do our prayers. We do our practice in order to accumulate merit. Then we eat lunch. So everything we do, whatever we do, it is for that self. It's for that I. So, though even it's just a small kind of I, but still, we get up in the morning, we fold our blankets, we put our clothes, we eat, etc. Now imagine there was another person who was next to us, another person, like not ourselves, but someone else. And we would do the same thing for that person. In the morning, we get up, we fold our clothes, we fold the blankets, we put on the clothes, we brush his teeth, we feed him. We do all these things for him all day long. Whatever we do for ourselves, we were to do this for that person. After 1 month, we would say, I got enough. This is too much. I need to change with someone. Someone else needs to take over my job. So, Gil is saying, I've been doing this. I'm 50 years old now. I've been doing this for 50 years. And I never felt it's too much. I never felt this is too much to take care of this person. Because why? It is for my own benefit. It is for me. The I is very important. I'm very important, so therefore I've been doing this for me. And so I do Dharma, I practice Dharma. Why? Because I want to not, in my next life, I don't want to be reborn in the lower realms. I don't want to go to the hell realm. I don't want to be reborn in an unfortunate state. And then I may strive for or aspire to attain liberation, because I want to become liberated. I want to attain liberation. And if there's Buddhahood, well, that's what I want to attain. I want to become a Buddha. I have to become a Buddha.
아니 드림에서 가요래서 깨지거나 마데유스 마데유 나 춤이 시작이면다 마데유 마파리유 근데 시작이면다 마데유스 딜레디 다가랑다 바기 컴바티나로 티티가 데스 딜레디 다시 집사부까지 아리투스 디바테 또 티티티 디나로요 마데유스 디나시 말을라기도 말다기도 마강에 체그레 마강이 되게 되게 시작입니다. 제가 마디 셔서 대라 시작이다. 다 뒤에 아니 가장 긴 게 중요하신 아니 마대 유딩이도 레바나로 유딩이나 아니 내와를 친구도 되게 큰 전함이도 딱 완닝나로 유바이나 내 예를 놓아도 되게 좋아지는도 딱 완중하나로 유는 내 강나 닝다도 또 되게 좋아지는 요말 되게 제도 내르르르 전함데 메딩 마대 대유딩 아니 수근나로 되게 전함 메딩 딜러도 전에 다 가르치고래 남긴 지비지 당도 디송도 품비 초성 데이팅도 유대 받지. 다 딜라 지난 고사세의 수준의 모두 내요 말로 고사세의 다 요만데 다다 저진의 수지의 요바 인장 랍샤는 되게 매로 간다 풍부 유사딜라 풍부 고사딜라라는다 풍부 유사딜라 아니 차등이지 마다 딘낭지 내 제자버지 개매등이 풍부 유사 따다딜라 풍부 고사 따다딜라 아니 마세 차등이지 차사디 마이디 유사디 마디 차사디 딘지도 차등이지.
So this precious kind of self, this precious I. So then now we need to see how does it appear to our own mind and how does it actually exist in reality. So where is that I? I mean, how is that I? How does that I exist? Where is that I? So again, in the case of Geshe-Tupen-Pesana, so where is Geshe-Tupen-Pesana? If someone were to call him from the outside, well, Geshe-la would say, I'm here. I'm in this room, on this seat. So then Geshe-la kind of pointed around him. I wouldn't say I'm up there pointing at the ceiling. I wouldn't say I'm on the right side when he pointed at the right side. I would respond by saying I'm in this space. I'm right here. So when I have a sense that someone is looking at me, then it's like a sense that the person who's looking at me is not the one above me or to my right or to my left. They're looking at me in this very place here. And again, Geshe-la pointed at himself. Having problems, so when I have problems, I'm not pointing at something else that has problems, but at myself. I'm pointing at myself. So Geshe-la is pointing at his body. He was pointing at his body while saying that. So therefore, when I have a sense, where's the I? It is here. And again, Geshe-la pointed to himself. So the I also, when I say it's here in the body, there's no sense in general that it's in the brain, for example. Because if it was in the brain, well, the I would be above the lungs. So it would be located above the lungs. Also, there's no sense that it's located in the heart. Because then to the heart, it would be located in a place to the right is one lung and to the left is another lung. And then the intestines, and if it was in the intestine, well, then it would be located in a place which, on top of which is the heart. So there's really not, in general, a specific place where we say this is I. So therefore, there's the sentence you find in the scriptures, that the self exists independent or merely of the collection of the attributes. So there's also this expression in Tibetan, this kosa, or kind of means the place where something is, the place where something abides in. So this is usually when we say the place where something abides in, the place it occupies, something, a place that is occupied, it refers to something physical. So when we say here, where is the place, which space do the five aggregates occupy? Well, that same space is where the I is. So the space that the five aggregates occupy is exactly the place where we can find the I. There is no other place. So this is exactly, the I is exactly located in the place that occupies the space that the aggregates occupy.
다 차서 딜라 거리차기도 시디 마 신이 투모만 이마치 차등이지. 풍부 디처즈디 많이 봐. 앞에나 아니 마베지 티규 마다 수부디 베지 티규 로아디 베지 티규 카디 베지 티규 셈디 베지 티규 딘디민도 기시 템바이네 텐당베데 카가레. 베나 데 레용디 마르 레송스 라발레 레송 니가 텐술 요르디 텐술 카가도 라발레 레송 레디 수로아디 로바 마르 레송 레디 차강 로바 제상 베나 라발레 레송 레디 kimse 참매기 차르기리 딜 레용디 라바치 레송 세치 차르기리 이는 마르 레송 세 수로아디 예셈들마도 kimse 셈나 마르 레송 레 마로 제상 라발레 레송 레디 마르 레송 세디 차강 로바치 데이터 디나 신치기 아니 제가 내 디치 나 디치기도 슬레드잖아요. 수보다 센다 초품의 초바다 차시다 디기디 철수디 마힘비 마시에 튜모임이 뭐지 차등이지.
So with respect to this place where that self is found, there is a sense that there's a unique kind of I, that there's a unique kind of self, which is none of the aggregates. So when I, for example, think like I'm teaching this class, I'm giving a class, I'm teaching a class here, so or I'm teaching the scriptures. In this case, there's no sense my lungs are teaching this class, my throat is teaching this class, my mouth is teaching this class, or my consciousness is teaching this class. Likewise, when I say someone touches my upper arm, so Geshe-la pointed at his upper arm. So there's a difference between someone touches that arm, the way that appears to the mind, as opposed to someone touches me. Those two appear differently. In particular, if I were to just say touching an arm and touching the eye, because when I say an arm, it could be anyone's arm. It could be the arm of anyone in this room. Whereas on the other hand, with the self, that's different. That's just me. So therefore, when I do anything I do, when I do something, there's a sense it's none of my parts that's doing it. It's mainly I'm doing it. A unique self appears that engages in that kind of activity.
차당디 근데 자기도 시디 아니 대기라와나 신실로네 아니 되는데서는 이제 있잖아 왜 레라다 안 거의 대유스 마대유스 나디 풍부 유세 되네 예대버지 대기 마스 철사 되네 예대버 풍부 유세 되네 예대버 진짜 차당 주요되니 다 되나신 아니 딩가래 나디 아니 주부주세 되네 마세지 딘 지금 다 뒤져다 되나신 얘기도 말을 야부치기도 말을 도제치기도 시디 컨주 참여 주부주세들아 다 주부주세들 유리기 외에 막 세야지 지금 주부주세 여반한 신지 안 차등이
So how does that self appear? So what is the sense of the self appearing here? So as mentioned before, if someone calls me, if someone calls Geshe-la, then Geshe-la will say, hey. So, and then if the person asks, where are you? Geshe-la will say, here. So where is the person? Where is the person? So the person is going to be where the aggregates are. So where the aggregates are, this is where the sense of I is. So the I appears exactly in that place where the aggregates are. So this is where the self is, right here. So therefore, when someone harms me, there's a sense that the self that is being harmed, that is the self right here. The self that is being benefited, again, that's the self right here. So there's a sense that the self exists really in this place here. In this place here, this is where there's really a self. A type of self that you could actually point your finger at. It's something that is literally, it's possible to point it out.
아니 풍부 유사들라 마시에 tumma 임바지 차르기요레 안 디디자네 로라 딘디 차르기도 대참이나 지고도 부시러다 로라 차르기요라 딘디 마임바체 마데유스 나네 파게 가르스고레 왜 로라 차와 참 마임바치니 파게라 왜네실이 유딩이지 유샤샤 지기도 딘디 차르용디 야나메나니 디 차르다디 주마레 노르레 마노르레 심주치니 메베토 대바 인샤샤지 차르바나 신무인들이 예샤샤지기 터네 아니 마송교체 메이치도 은자와디 제대로 딜레디 왜니치도 유버침바
So likewise, when we say the self is where the aggregates are, there's a sense of the unique kind of self. So that if this unique type of self, if it was just appearing to the mind, if it was just that, a sense of a unique self that just appeared to the mind, that would be okay. So, but in actuality, it's not like, oh, there's just an appearance to the mind. When I think I'm here, so I'm here, the sense of I'm here, it's not just an appearance, it's rather I'm really there. The way it appears, that's how it really is. So I never really question, so if I were to think, okay, is it bold or not, is that appearance deceptive or not, if I were to analyze it, that'd be different. But I never analyze this. So I'm protecting myself. I'm engaging in certain activities. There's a sense that this I is not just appearing, but it's really there. It is there in reality. It's there in actuality.
That dinashin kazakini ki shuwa nashin ngawani bi loda ani mingda digidi pa shani digidi mene ngadi yueshongichi toba tanye dila chilwa mengichi nga seji chagido.
So here, as also said in the previous class, likewise, when I'm thinking I, so there's a sense that yes, I'm thinking I, but I don't exist because of that mind. I don't exist from the side of the mind as being posited by that mind. Even if I were not to think I, there's a sense that without that thought, without that awareness, there would still be I.
라단치니 가게 라바이나 따디 타니디야 중난의 메인사 따다 지기유메 상다에 태가를 나 쓰니 지 신다지 균이 많이봐 콜레 차르데디 나레 세야저보다 디왕기 중샤교디 나레 세야저 최신다를 베기 다 알라다 베기 정도 주도지래요 최신다를 주도치는 거지 더들 베기 모두 되셔 최신다를 주도치는 거지 더니 디 나레 태가를 어디 문진 제용해야지 다가랑 같이 찰수 있는 거 땡이다.
So Gela is saying he likes to use a